He knew, as well as we in our world do, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But he also knew that, for human beings, good intentions are sometimes all there are. Angels may be safe from damnation, but human beings are less fortunate things, and for them, hell is always close. Did they all live happily ever after? They did not. No one ever does, in spite of what the stories may say. They had their good days, as you do, and they had their bad days, and you know about those. They had their victories, as you do, and they had their defeats, and you know about those too. There were times when they felt ashamed of themselves, knowing that they had not done their best, and there were times when they knew they had stood where their God had meant them to stand. All I'm trying to say is that they lived as well as they could, each and every one of them. Some lived longer than others, but all lived well and bravely, and I love them all, and I'm not ashamed of my love. People's minds, particularly the minds of children, are like wells, deep wells full of sweet water, and sometimes when a particular thought is too unpleasant to bear, the person who has that thought will lock it into a heavy box and throw it into that well. He listens for the splash, and then the box is gone. Except it is not, of course. Not really. Stephen King, The Eyes of the Dragon. I remember watching Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy when I was in high school and was utterly taken away by how beautiful it all was. It is, for me at least, the crowning triumph of a generation and was what sparked an interest in fantasy fiction in people who were getting more and more depressed by most postmodern works of the time. Anyway, if there was anything in the films that stuck to me, it was that speech that Samwise Gamgee, played by Sean Astin, had said near the end of the movie. That while we may be too young to understand some of the stories told to us as children, there are those that stay with us to adulthood, and it is only then that we fully realize what they mean. This time, I'd like to share with you all one of the first stories I read with my grandfather when I was but a young lad. This video will sum up some of the key points and main characters of Stephen King's Eyes of the Dragon, one of the first books to catch my interest as a child. Hi, hello, and welcome again everybody to another episode of Natural Juan. This time around we're going to discuss one of Stephen King's novels, The Eyes of the Dragon, a fantasy novel that is different but still connected to the Dark Tower series. Anyway, before we go on, I'd like to invite you all to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell for notifications if you would like to see more content like this. Special shout out too to Mr. Jonathan Green, my patron in Patreon. If you would also like to support my channel and what I do here, please feel free to check out my Patreon, PayPal, and Gcash information in the description below. Alright, with all that out of the way, let us all look through The Eyes of the Dragon. To start with, The Eyes of the Dragon is a rarity in that it is a fantasy novel with kings, princes, and evil wizards rather than monstrous beings and crazed murderers as is common in Stephen King fare. It tells the tale of an old and dying king and his sons in a kingdom that resembles a place in medieval Europe, albeit somewhat more idealistic than that. Plotting against the king and his princes is the evil wizard Randall Flagg, which I assume most of you are already familiar with. The story is set in a kingdom called Delane, which, as mentioned, somewhat resembles a medieval European setting that is slightly more idealistic, having had good and just rulers more than madmen and tyrants, with a long and intricate history. This kingdom has long been ruled by a long line of kings and queens, with the latest one being King Roland, an old man with a penchant for hunting. It should be said, as the narrator himself would say, that King Roland had tried to be a good king, but had only made it to being a mediocre one. Thus, one could surmise that while Delane isn't a terrible place like those found in Warhammer or Pathfinder, it still needs a bit of work. Luckily, King Roland's elder son, Prince Peter, might be able to change things, but Randall Flagg, Stephen King's most enduring villain, might have something to say about that. The Eyes of the Dragon is also noted for its characters, which make for a very interesting story. Indeed, as mentioned in the opening quotes, Stephen King himself loves these characters, as, without them, we wouldn't really have much of a story. I will also admit that I find the characters very endearing, and they have stayed with me to this very day, and reading about them reminds me of my family when they still lived. The first character I'll go over is Randall Flagg, or simply Flagg as he is called in the book. He is, without doubt, the villain of the story, as he often is in just about all of King's works. Anyway, in this story, he is King Roland's court wizard and primary advisor. However, one can easily surmise that he is an evil advisor and not one that will lead the kingdom into any kind of positive result. He has, in fact, been manipulating King Roland for much of the man's life, and has been trying to get the old monarch to commit atrocities but has mostly failed in doing so. In reality, he has been to Delane many times before, and his goals has always been the same when he comes: to cause as much disorder, lawlessness, pain, and destruction as possible to the kingdom of Delane. Then there is, of course, King Roland himself, whose name is the same as that of another of Stephen King's main protagonists, Roland Deschain of the Dark Tower series. However, they do not seem to be quite the same person, in the same way that Flagg is also the same Flagg from The Stand. What can be said about the man is that he has great aim and is a skilled hunter, being responsible for bringing down the last dragon in the land, which he later had preserved and hung on a wall. While it is said that he did everything he could to be a great and memorable king, he was only able to avoid doing anything evil, which is why he has so much hope for his sons. There is also Queen Sasha, the king's young wife, who, while certainly very young compared to her husband, turned out to be both brave and wise. She was selected to be in an arranged marriage with King Roland by none other than Flagg himself, who thought that her youth would make her easy to manipulate. But how wrong the magician was! Before Flagg could even realize what was happening, Sasha became his opposite, becoming the angel on King Roland's shoulder, doing her best to steer the old man into making better decisions. Of course, Flagg is none too pleased by this, and makes plans to put her away somehow. Of the king's sons, there is Peter, who is the eldest, and may very well be the saving grace of both King Roland and all of Delane. He seems to be one of those rare children who might just be able to bring about a glorious golden age to his kingdom. That said, Flagg is also well aware of him and knows that the boy might just be able to cause his downfall. The youngest of King Roland's sons is Thomas, who can best be described as a spitting image of his father in terms of both appearance and behavior. This becomes a key trait of the prince, as this leads his father to prefer his older brother, because Roland thinks Peter would go on to become a more efficient leader. This is a fact that is not lost on Randall Flagg, and is why he makes an effort to corrupt the young prince. There are other memorable characters throughout the novel, from the stern but noble Judge Anders Pena and his butler Arlen, the loyal royal butler Dennis, Prince Peter's impoverished best friend Ben Stad, a rebel girl that the author names after his own daughter Naomi, and the rowdy prison warden Besson, who is most certainly not a troll or a dwarf. I would tell you more, but I'd prefer it if you read it all for yourself. There is a lot of things that I think would be more pleasurable to discover on your own than if I were to tell it to you here. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Natural Juan. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell for notifications to see more like it. Also, if you want to support my channel, my Patreon, PayPal, and Gcash information are in the description below. Natural Juan, out.